I never thought my 13-year marriage would end over a dog. But that was the harsh truth. It was a Saturday morning. I stood in the kitchen, still in my worn gray pajamas, my hands trembling as I clutched a cup of cold coffee. In front of me, the man who once promised to stand by me for life, Jared, was zipping up his suitcase like he was heading to a conference. But no. This time, he wasn't coming back. He didn't even look at me. His eyes were cold, his tone so harsh it made my stomach twist. "I'm taking Rocco, you keep the kid." Rocco, our husky we raised since I was pregnant with Caleb, was the soul of our family. He slept at the foot of our bed, barked whenever Caleb fell, licked my son's tears on nights he had nightmares. And now, Jared claimed him like an old coat. Cold. Without an ounce of apology. I stood frozen. I wanted to scream, to smash that suitcase, to beg him to stay. But my lips wouldn't move. Everything was suffocated by her presence. Vera, his mother. Always lurking like a toxic shadow behind Jared. She leaned against the doorframe, wrapped in a pale pink fur coat, gaudy pearl necklace around her neck, her lips curled into a smug grin like she'd just finished watching a comedy. And she didn't bother hiding her mockery. "At least the dog listens," she giggled. They laughed like Caleb was some discarded item in a family yard sale, like I was the pathetic loser left with the scraps. They walked off with the dog, leaving me with the child, like it was punishment. I stood there, the room drained of air. I didn't scream, I didn't cry in front of them. I just picked up Caleb's crayon drawing from the kitchen counter, a picture of the three of us holding hands under a bright red sun, and walked right past them. Caleb was in the next room, 9 years old, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, headphones on, coloring with markers. He didn't see the storm that had just ripped his world apart. Not yet. But I did. And in that moment I made a vow to myself. Caleb would never think he was the reason our family broke. Jared could have Rocco. Vera could think she won. I would take Caleb. And I would protect him from those who laughed at his pain. That night, I held Caleb tight as he hugged Rocco's old collar Jared had left on the floor. Caleb whispered, his eyes dry. "I don't think Dad likes us very much, Mom." Those words stabbed through me like a cold knife. But I didn't show it. I stroked his hair, held his small hand in mine. Caleb didn't cry. And neither did I. But to understand how Jared could throw out such cruelty, you need to know the story didn't start with Rocco. It started with the small cracks I ignored for too long. I met Jared in a small town by Lake Michigan. I was 24, working as a print shop designer, and he was a sales manager for a sporting goods company. Jared had a smile that made me forget my way home, and stories about the future that sounded like fairy tales. He knew exactly how to make a girl feel like the most special person on the planet, and I believed it. We married less than a year after our first meeting. But after the wedding, Jared was no longer the man who walked me by the lake under the moonlight. He started managing every penny I spent, every call I made, even how I raised Caleb after he was born. He called it caring. I called it suffocating, but back then I didn't have the courage to call it by its real name, manipulation. When Caleb caught a cold, Jared scolded me for being weak, saying letting him skip school would turn him into a loser. When I asked if he could take Caleb to the doctor, Jared shrugged. "You're the mom, you deal with it." Those comments happened so often that I almost stopped asking. When Caleb turned 5, I tried to push back. I wanted to enroll him in an art class. Jared sneered. "We're not raising a starving artist in this house." I stayed silent, just like I had for years, because every time I spoke up, Jared only needed a few sugar-coated words in front of others to make me look like the unstable, nagging mom. He controlled even the smallest details. His looks could turn every family meal into a silent courtroom. Jared controlled the thermostat, even how I cut my hair. Once, I tried dyeing it chestnut brown. He looked at me, smirking. "Now you look like a divorced soccer mom." I forced a laugh, but inside, I knew a part of me had died. Caleb saw everything. He no longer babbled about comets or spaceships like before. He moved cautiously, tiptoeing in his own house. Once I overheard him muttering while stacking Legos, "Dad hates me. Dad hates Mom too." That sentence made me step out onto the balcony to breathe. I once thought I was protecting Caleb by staying silent. But that silence only let fear take deeper roots inside my son. The breaking point came on a suffocating August night. Jared came home late from a golf game reeking of beer. He tossed his keys on the counter, glanced at Caleb doing his spelling homework. Is the kid done, or do I have to teach him how to spell myself? I softly answered, Caleb's finished. Jared let out a cold chuckle, his voice like steel. Good, I don't want him growing up like you, stuck in a dead-end job begging men for money. He said it as if I were nothing more than debris floating through his life. Then he pulled out his phone and disappeared into the living room. That night I locked myself in the bathroom, sitting on the icy tile floor. I didn't cry. I just sat there, numb and hollow. And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbroken anymore. I felt done. 3 weeks later, Jared walked out, and as you already know, he took Rocco, leaving me and Caleb behind. But what I didn't know back then was that Caleb saw everything. He didn't ask much, but that night, after Jared slammed the car door and vanished into the darkness, Caleb sat in the living room, clutching Rocco's collar, his eyes wide, hollow. Mom, Dad told me he left because you're too difficult. I sat down next to him, my hands trembling as I stroked his hair. He said he's tired of you always complaining, of me being weak, of me crying. He said he doesn't need us. I pulled Caleb into my arms, feeling his frail body shake in waves. I couldn't cry anymore. I just thought, if Jared could be this cruel, then Caleb deserved to know the truth. And one day, he would. Not from my mouth, but from the raw truth Jared hid behind those messages he thought would never be exposed. The period after Jared left wasn't loud like I had imagined. No screaming arguments, no police calls, no midnight threats. It was just silence seeping through every corner of our old 2-bedroom apartment. But that silence wasn't peaceful. It was like a thin layer of dust clinging to every wall, persistent, suffocating, forcing me to learn to move lightly, breathe quietly, as if Jared's presence still haunted the leftover coffee mugs. Even though Jared didn't bother to send Caleb a goodnight text for over a month, he still hired a lawyer, filing for joint custody. He wanted to split the weeks evenly. Mom's week, Dad's week. Like Caleb was a toy that needed to be divided fairly. I knew it wasn't out of love for Caleb. For Jared, this was a battle of pride, a performance he refused to lose. And of course, Vera, my ex-mother-in-law, didn't miss her part in the show. She attended every lawyer meeting, dressed to perfection, her perfume so overpowering it masked the stench of lies she dragged behind her. She never looked at me, but she sent weekly emails dripping with fake sweetness. Dear Zoe, I'm very concerned about Caleb. I heard he's looking a bit chubby in his 3rd grade graduation photo. The boy needs more greens in his diet, you know. I didn't reply. I kept them all. Just like I kept the cards she sent Caleb. The flashy gifts with syrupy notes. Daddy and Grandma always love you. Don't listen to the adults who try to confuse you. But Caleb wasn't as naive as Vera thought. He put the gifts on the counter and asked me in a whisper, why does it feel like a trap? I didn't answer right away. I just boxed up the gifts and stored them in the closet. Meanwhile, Caleb drew more. But the pictures no longer had vibrant colors. They were all gray and dark green, and in all of them Rocco stood between me and Caleb, the dog with sad eyes, like an invisible shield. I knew Caleb missed Rocco with every fiber of his being. He taped the drawings all over his bedroom walls, adding wings to Rocco, turning him into a superhero guarding us both. At night, I heard Caleb whisper in his sleep, Rocco won't let Dad take me away, right, Rocco? I lay in the next room, feeling my heart shatter into invisible shards. But Jared kept playing the role of the perfect dad in public. He showed up unannounced at Caleb's school, wearing a best dad ever hoodie, handing out granola bars to Caleb's classmates, chatting up single moms at the soccer field. Caleb stood there gripping his backpack straps, his eyes lost. He didn't know whether to smile or to hide. At home, Caleb asked me tougher questions. Why does Dad say you won't let me see him? Why does Dad say I'm scared to go to his house? I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm. Sweetheart, your feelings are real. If you're scared, you have the right to say you're scared. If you're sad, you have the right to say you're sad. Caleb stayed silent. He didn't argue, but those hollow eyes haunted me all night. Jared knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't need to hit Caleb to hurt him. All he had to do was whisper sweet poison into his ear, enough to make Caleb feel torn between two worlds. I started documenting everything. Every text Jared sent Caleb. Mom said no again, huh? Guess she locked the door on me like always. Every email from Vera. If Caleb doesn't learn discipline, he'll end up like your side of the family. I saved them all, printed them out, kept them safe. Even if Jared never laid a hand on Caleb, I knew he was eroding him, little by little. And I knew soon enough, Jared would make a mistake. One wrong message, one wrong moment. And when that day came, Caleb would be the one to make sure Jared couldn't hide from the truth any longer. I always knew Jared would destroy himself. I just never expected the end would come from his own phone. It was a quiet Wednesday night. So quiet it made my skin crawl. Caleb was in his room, the door slightly ajar, the glow from his tablet casting pale light across his young face. I walked by, ready to tell him it was time for bed, but the sight of Caleb gripping the tablet with trembling hands made me freeze. "Caleb?" I whispered. He looked up, eyes red and face ghostly pale. No tears, just a silent panic I had never seen in him before. "Mom, I think Dad sent this to me by mistake," Caleb murmured, his hand shaking as he handed me the tablet. I sat next to him, my heart sinking as I scrolled through the messages. I could barely believe what I was reading. Jared had texted Caleb, or rather, he thought he was texting someone else, maybe his new girlfriend or some buddy. The words cut through me like knives. "That weak kid is just like his mom. Once I get more custody, I'll straighten him out, won't let him grow up to be trash." And the final one, the one that made me clutch the tablet so hard my knuckles ached. "Can't wait to be rid of that baggage and start my real life." It felt like the ground vanished beneath my feet. Caleb looked at me, his lips pressed so tightly they turned white. "Mom? Is it my fault? Did I do something wrong?" I pulled Caleb into my arms, my heart aching. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Not now. Not when Caleb was looking at me, desperate for an answer. "No, Caleb," I said, my voice steadier than ever. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're an amazing kid, your dad. He's the one with the problem, not you." Caleb stayed silent, burying his face into my shoulder. That night, I didn't sleep. I printed every message, saved them on a USB, emailed them to myself, backed them up on every hard drive. I knew we had our evidence, not just for court, but for Caleb, so he would know the truth always stood with him. The next morning I called my lawyer, Maggie, a woman far calmer and tougher than I had expected. When I read her the messages, the line went so quiet I thought the call had dropped. "Zoe, this is huge," Maggie finally said. "But are you sure you want Caleb involved directly? He's only 9, standing in court. It'll be heavy." I went silent. I had thought about it all night. But I also remembered what Caleb told me the night Jared left. "Mom, you always tell me to speak up when something's wrong. Is this one of those times?" Caleb didn't want to hide, he wanted to speak, and this time, I wouldn't stop him. I sat Caleb at the kitchen table, next to his favorite warm milk and butter cookies. I told him about the trial. About what might happen. That he didn't have to do this if he didn't want to. Caleb looked at me, his eyes far older than his age. "I want to speak," he said softly. "I want people to know the truth." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I knew I couldn't shield Caleb from every hurt, but I could stand beside him so he knew he was never alone. From that day, Maggie and I prepared every detail, submitting evidence, writing statements. Caleb practiced his words for court not as a scared child, but as a brave witness. Even though I knew Jared and Vera wouldn't sit quietly, I prepared Caleb for every mental trap Jared might try to set. 2 weeks before court, I entered a state of pure survival mode. Every morning, I woke up with a checklist in my head. Review files, double-check messages, organize emails, work with Maggie to ensure everything followed the right legal steps. I thought I had prepared for everything, but I forgot one thing: Caleb. He needed to be prepared too, not just with documents but with reassurance. One evening, I sat with Caleb at the dining table, The warm light cast shadows over his tired little face. In front of me, Caleb flipped through the small notebook I had given him to jot down his feelings. Every page was filled with drawings of Rocco with giant wings, standing between Caleb and Jared. "Are you ready?" I asked softly, hiding the knot of fear in my chest. Caleb put down his pencil, his gaze steady on me. "Mom, I want to speak. I want to stand in court. I don't want people thinking I'm weak or scared of Dad." I swallowed hard. Even as his mother, even after everything we'd been through, I still wasn't used to seeing my son stand so firm, like an adult. Maggie came to our house the next afternoon bringing a summary of the case and a plan to prepare Caleb. She spread everything out on the table. Clear printed evidence, documentation, my statement. "Zoe, we have a strong case," Maggie said, her voice calm and steady. "But if Caleb wants to speak in court, we have to make sure he gets proper support. I've requested that his testimony be given in the form of a short statement, to limit any cross-examination." I nodded, knowing that was the best option we had. Caleb sat next to me, listening carefully, like a little soldier preparing for battle. He didn't ask much, just quietly took notes, highlighting the key part. "I want to hold the printed messages. I want to read them out loud for everyone," Caleb said, his eyes shining with a determination I had never seen in him before, the kind of light that only comes when a child reaches their breaking point and decides to stand up. That night, we practiced as if it were a school presentation. Caleb stood in the living room, wearing his neatly ironed school uniform, holding the printed texts Jared had sent. His voice still shook a bit, but in every word I saw that Caleb was no longer the little boy clinging to my shirt in tears. He read loudly, clearly, without hesitation. "Can't wait to be rid of that baggage. My mom is useless." Then Caleb looked up, locking eyes with me. "I'll tell the court. I don't want to live where I'm treated like trash." Couldn't hold it back anymore. I pulled Caleb into my arms, letting my tears fall freely for the first time, not from pain, but from pride. Because my son was becoming the person I had always hoped he would be. Someone who dared to speak the truth, even when the truth cut like a knife. Maggie finalized the case file for court the next morning. I signed every page, my hands steady, no hesitation. The closer we got to the court date, the more Jared and Vera ramped up their game. Vera even showed up at Caleb's school with an expensive toy and a sloppy card that read, "Daddy's just fighting for you." Caleb handed me the card right in the car. "Mom, I don't want this stuff anymore." I smiled gently. "You don't have to accept anything that makes you uncomfortable, Caleb. You have the right to say no." And that's exactly what he did. I reported the incident to Maggie. She quickly filed a complaint about Vera approaching Caleb outside of supervised visitation. Jared reacted immediately, accusing me of weaponizing Caleb. But this time I didn't react, didn't reply. I was done playing his tired games. I focused all my energy on keeping Caleb emotionally safe. We spent every night talking, not about Jared or court, but about the beach trips I used to dream of as a kid, about how I was once scared of speaking in front of a crowd. We laughed more, even if some laughs still carried emptiness. The night before the hearing, Caleb climbed into my bed, lying silently in the dark, then whispered, "Mom, what if I say it and the court doesn't believe me?" I turned toward him, brushing his hair back. "The truth doesn't need anyone to believe it to still be the truth, sweetheart. You just speak what you know is right, that's enough." Caleb didn't answer, just squeezed my hand tighter. And the next morning we walked into the courthouse. Calm, silent, but this time, that silence wasn't a shield of weakness. It was a new kind of strength. The strength of the truth about to be spoken. The day of the final hearing arrived. That morning, the air was colder than usual, the sky dull and heavy like my heart. But Caleb was different. He wore his crisp white shirt, buttoned to the top, and his old red sneakers that he said made him feel braver. Caleb didn't waver. He held the case file tightly, his blue eyes calm like a still lake. Maggie waited for us at the courthouse steps, her petite figure hidden under a long black coat. She just nodded. No words were needed. Everything was prepared, evidence carefully packed in the court file. The request for Caleb to speak had been approved. Across the room, Jared stood ready, dressed in a gray suit, tie perfectly straight, posing like he was about to give a keynote speech at a business conference. Vera stood behind him in a navy dress, her heavily made-up face stiff, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for some imaginary ally. Jared glanced at Caleb briefly, then looked away as if Caleb was a stranger. The hearing began. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled walls, the smell of old papers mixing with cold coffee and harsh men's cologne. Caleb sat next to me, gripping his worn notebook, his palms sweating, but his eyes never wavered. Jared's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a loving father who only wanted balance for Caleb. Her words flowed smoothly, polished, but every sentence made me clench my fists tighter. No one mentioned the months Jared disappeared. No one brought up the mornings Caleb sat in silence, staring at his cereal box. No one talked about the messages where Jared treated Caleb like a burden. I didn't interrupt. Maggie didn't rush to object. We let them play their part. When it was Maggie's turn, she only needed one simple sentence. "Your Honor, we request that Caleb Carter be allowed to speak directly." The courtroom fell into heavy silence. Caleb stood up, taking small but steady steps to the stand. I saw his hands tremble slightly as he opened his notebook, but his voice did not. "My name is Caleb Carter. I'm 9 years old," he began, his voice clear and bright, though soft. He held up the printed messages. "I want to read what my dad sent me. I think everyone should know." Caleb took a deep breath and started. "Can't wait to be rid of that baggage and start my real life." His voice echoed through the old wooden walls, bouncing off stunned faces. Jared sat frozen, his jaw clenched tight. Vera turned toward him, her face drained of all color. Caleb continued. "Oh, cries like a baby, just like his mom, useless." Caleb looked up, his eyes wet but fierce. "My mom doesn't cry like my dad says. She's strong. She helps me when I'm scared. She never calls me useless." The room was utterly silent. I could even hear my own heartbeat pounding in my chest. Caleb gripped the paper tightly, speaking his final sentence, his voice no longer shaking. "I don't want to live in a place where I'm treated like I'm the problem. I just want to feel safe." He turned toward me, sitting down, pressing close to me as if to declare to the world that he had chosen where he belonged. The judge sat still for a few seconds, his hands clasped, his gaze hardening. "Thank you, Caleb, that was very brave," he said, then turned to Jared, his tone colder. "Mr. Carter, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Jared jumped up, but his lawyer quickly interrupted, requesting a recess. The judge shook his head. "The court has heard enough. Based on clear evidence and the honest testimony from Caleb, I'm granting full physical and legal custody to Miss Zoe Carter. Mr. Carter's contact will be restricted to supervised visits only, under the oversight of a child welfare agency and a licensed therapist." The room felt like all the air had been sucked out. Jared didn't argue. He slumped into his chair, staring at the floor like he wanted to disappear. Vera walked out before the session even adjourned, her high heels clacking sharply against the cold courtroom floor. Caleb squeezed my hand under the table. He didn't smile, didn't cry. He just whispered in my ear, "Mom, can we go home now? I want pancakes with syrup." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "Of course, Caleb, let's go home." We walked out of the courthouse. The sky was still gray, but in Caleb's eyes I knew the sky was finally blue again. After the trial, Jared vanished from our lives as if he had never existed. No apology texts, no late-night calls. He wiped away all traces of himself in the most cowardly way I had always known him capable of. Vera, too. No more emails, no more birthday cards, no more packages disguised with fake words of love. Maggie told me that was the best-case scenario. Not everyone gets such a clean ending in divorce cases. I just gave a faint smile. Lucky? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the emptiness I had grown used to. In the weeks that followed, I discovered something strange about silence. Silence, when no longer colored by threats or anxiety, became surprisingly comforting. Our tiny apartment suddenly felt bigger, lighter. Breakfasts were no longer rushed, no more judgmental stares from Jared, no more Vera's condescending phone calls. Caleb started to change faster than I expected. He slept through the night. No more nightmares. No more drawings of dogs with giant wings protecting us. Instead, Caleb drew vibrant worlds, filled with flawed but brave superheroes, strange planets, where kindness was the greatest power. One afternoon, I walked into Caleb's room, surprised to see on his desk a picture of me, standing in the middle of a city with a golden cape, holding a shield that said "Truth," with a pancake drawn on it. "You made me a superhero?" I laughed. Caleb nodded, his eyes sparkling. "The pancake superhero. She saves kids who are told they're useless." I hugged him tightly. For the first time in months, I laughed without it feeling forced. My life changed too. I returned to freelance design work with new energy. No more draining work days shadowed by the fear of my phone buzzing with one of Jared's threatening texts. I took on projects I loved, saving every dollar for Caleb's art classes, for soccer lessons I once thought were luxuries. I joined a small book club in the neighborhood, where women like me, tired, once broken but stitching themselves back together day by day, sat together, sharing stories no one wanted to hear, but everyone needed to tell. Caleb and I learned to slow down together. We went on weekend picnics, walked in the park, watched dogs play without that sharp pang of missing Rocco. Caleb still remembered Rocco, but he no longer mentioned Jared. One night, while Caleb was drawing an astronaut exploring a new planet, he paused, looked up, and asked me, "Mom, do you hate Dad?" The question made me freeze. I thought long and hard. "No, Caleb, I don't hate him. I don't have space in my heart for hate anymore." I looked at Caleb, gently squeezing his small hand. "I just feel sad for your dad, because he missed the chance to be loved, to be your father." Caleb was quiet, then nodded. "I don't hate him either, I just don't miss him anymore." Knowing he had just let go of the last weight he carried. No anger, no fear, just acceptance. I no longer hoped Jared would call. I no longer flinched at new messages. I didn't even remember him on holidays. But sometimes, when I watched Caleb laugh, I felt a pang of sadness for Jared. Because that man had given up on an amazing son, one who would grow up. Not because of him, but because of his own strength, courage, and honesty. I got my life back, I got my laughter back, and most importantly, I got my freedom back. A freedom no one could ever take from me again. I used to think winning in court was the end of the story. But it turned out it was only the beginning. The beginning of a life no longer suffocated by words that dripped like acid. The beginning of days where Caleb could laugh without fearing someone mocking him for being weak. The beginning of me, the woman who had been turned into a shadow in her own home, now knowing how to stand tall and breathe deeply without feeling small. I used to think I had lost. Because Jared took Rocco, the dog Caleb and I saw as family. Because he walked away looking like the winner while I was left with Caleb, a boy with a heart full of cracks. But I was wrong. Because only when Jared disappeared I realized I had the best part of the story. Not the dog, not the old house, but Caleb. That boy, the one who stood before the court, before the adults who had kept him silent for years, dared to speak the truth. When I look at Caleb now, I see he's not just my son. Caleb is living proof that truth, love, and courage can change a destiny. I know many people still think children don't understand, that their voices are just whispers no one needs to hear. But I saw it with my own eyes. Caleb's voice shook an entire courtroom, forcing Jared, who always believed he held absolute power, to bow his head in silence. And that taught me a lesson greater than all. No one has the right to take away a child's voice. No one has the right to turn them into shadows in their own lives. One late afternoon, Caleb and I sat in the park, where dogs ran free and children's laughter danced on the breeze. Caleb drew a new picture, a world where superheroes didn't need capes, where strength didn't come from muscles but from daring to say, "I deserve to be loved." He handed me the drawing, grinning wide. "Mom, you know what? I don't need Rocco anymore. I have you. And I have me." I hugged him, that warmth soothing the coldest days of my life. Jared once thought taking the dog was victory. But what he could never have was Caleb. A brave, honest, and kind-hearted boy. And I will never take that for granted. I know there will be days Caleb will remember Jared, wondering why his father chose to walk away so easily. And I know there are questions I'll never have answers for. But I believe Caleb will grow up without those questions eating away at his soul, because he's learned the most important lesson, that our worth doesn't come from someone accepting or rejecting us, but from the strength inside us and how we choose to face the world. And me? I no longer carry bitterness. I don't need to. I only carry freedom. The freedom of someone who walked through darkness without letting it define her. The freedom of a mother who saw her son stand stronger than any grown man I've ever known. I don't need to declare victory. I don't need Jared to see me happy. All I need is this afternoon. Sitting next to Caleb, listening to the wind rustle through his hair, hearing his laughter mix with the clear blue sky. Because that's something Jared will never have, and I will never lose again. Zoe's story isn't just about a custody battle. It's about reclaiming voice, worth, and peace after years of manipulation and oppression. I realized that truth, love, and courage are the most powerful weapons, even for a 9-year-old child. The day Caleb stood in court, he didn't just defend himself. He broke a cycle of silence I had once accepted, and from that moment on, we both knew. Truth always has the power to change destinies. What do you think about Zoe's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel to continue joining us in these raw, heartfelt stories about love, family, and courage.